Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the BuzzStream podcast. I'm your host, Vince Nero, and today I'm joined by Joni Sweet. She is a journalist, writer, PR consultant, coach. She's been featured in all kinds of great publications, Forbes, Time, Travel and Leisure, among many, many others. She also has a fantastic newsletter, which is where I came across her work. Also, shout out to Britt Klontz, who we had on our podcast. She also recommended Joni highly. Joni has a newsletter. She basically shares upcoming stories she's working on, but she also gives some great tips. And one of the things that kind of stood out to me is this live workshop that she has coming up. And I really think, anybody that's listening to this would be interested in it. So stay tuned for that. I'll let Joni give you the details. But before we get into all the stuff we're going to be talking about today, I just want to remind people to subscribe, share this stuff with your colleagues. The more you do that, the more you can have great guests on like Joni. And secondly, a quick reminder to check out List IQ. It's up, it's out, it's going, getting some great feedback. It is our media list builder that helps you basically build media lists, super relevant media lists right from Google News. It'll find the information that usually takes a really long time for you to manually go and dig for. It finds it in just seconds. It's not a media database, it's a list building tool. So definitely recommend checking it out if you're in PR, digital PR, and you're building media lists. Okay, with that out of the way, Joni, how you doing? Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, Vince. Thank you for having me. I know we've been trying to do this a while, so I'm so glad we finally made it happen.
Yeah. I'm thrilled to speak with you. I think one of the things that I always get a kick out of is speaking to people who are kind of both sides, have worked in both sides of, the aisle. And for me and for our listeners, I tend to interview people who are in the space, digital PR agency owners and practitioners. Rarely do we get, and I'm trying to do it a lot more, but rarely do we get people who have true journalistic background, which I think is so important to this. So let's get into this. Let's kind of set the stage for listeners. You wear a lot of hats these days, right? You're doing a lot of different things. What does a typical day look like for you these days?
Yeah, so no day is exactly the same, which I think is one of the nice things about being self-employed and being a freelancer is every day looks a little different. Lately, I've been in a really solid morning routine where I've been taking my mornings really slow. I'm not a morning person at all. So I've been really trying to lean into that instead of fight it and try and be on this, rigid 9 to 5 schedule. So yeah, usually my mornings have some red light therapy. I have a red light on my desk over
Ooh.
there and I blast my face with it, which makes me feel really good. And simultaneously, I'll do a guided meditation. Lately, I've been liking the app Insight Timer. So yeah, I'll do a meditation and then some journaling and breakfast and coffee, of course. And then usually by mid-morning, I'm kind of ready to roll. So that's usually my time of checking emails or doing small tasks like sending an invoice, that kind of thing. And then I'll break for lunch. And then my afternoons are my focused hours. So that's where I will schedule interviews. I'll write my newsletter. I'll work on any assignments I have for magazines or brands that I'm working with. Yeah, I think I said I'll work on my newsletter. And then I'll also schedule my consulting calls then too, because I feel like that's when my brain is really on and fired up and ready to give my best ideas. And then I usually wrap around 5, 6 o'clock, maybe a little later, depending on what's going on.
Yeah, I guess you don't have the issue of necessarily if you had worked in-house as an editor or something and you have, deadlines coming in and new news coming in, you're not like a breaking news reporter or something where you're plugged in 24/7. I guess that's nice. I am curious, in your position now as kind of a freelance journalist, you, it seems have a lot of stories that you're coming up with yourself rather than working through pitches from others. But can you kind of help clarify, what does that breakdown look like? Where are you getting your pitch ideas? Is a big part of your day still, going through this massive inbox full of crappy pitches from people?
Okay, so I used to say I get about 150 pitches a day. Now it's skewing 200 or more. The balance between journalists and people in public relations the gap keeps widening. There are more and more people in PR and fewer journalists. So that means those of us who are still doing this work get more and more pitches. So I do go through my inbox and I read most of the pitches I get, not all of them, but I actually do read most of them. With that said, most of my stories right now are actually coming from assignments from editors. So I found in my business, I do really well building long-term relationships with editors and becoming the person they lean on again and again for high quality work. So often the ideas are coming directly from my editors, and then I'm just looking for the right people or products to talk about in those stories or to interview. So that's a big chunk of it. Some of it's some of the pitches I receive are reactive based on my calls for pitches in my newsletter or just generally talking about what I'm working on and the types of sources or products I might need. And then I'm still getting a lot of cold pitches as well. So I do occasionally pitch ideas out to editors still. And I have a couple platforms like Forbes and Yahoo where I can write about whatever I think is important or interesting. So I am still very open to pitches for those platforms. And I'm always scouring my inbox to see what is happening, who has an interesting story to tell, something that I could write up for one of those publications kind of on my own with my own spin.
Yeah, and I know on your website, which again I'll put this in the show notes, but people should definitely check it out. Joni and Sweet, is that right?
Mhm.
.com, Joni. You say you cover health, wellness, travel, product reviews. It seems like in that covers a wide range, right? Is your inbox a mess? Like it feels like it would be very difficult to find a relevant story in something like that. Like, I guess what I'm trying to understand is like, what are you looking for? What stands out to you in an inbox like that?
Yeah. So I will say, like most journalists, my inbox is indeed a mess. Right now, like 450 unread messages because last week I didn't, late last week I was on deadline for something and I didn't have time to keep up with my inbox. I usually do trying to get to inbox 0 at the end of every day. But yeah, I use my inbox as like a personal database of sources and story ideas. So I rarely delete an email unless I'm really trying to make space in my inbox. I already pay Google extra money for storage. I don't want to pay them more than I already am. So, occasionally I'll delete emails, but generally they live in that inbox for a really long time. So there have been times when I've, searched my own inbox for a relevant source or a brand that I need to get in touch with. And I'll pull emails from 2016 and start emailing those folks who emailed me and say, are you still working with this brand, or can you connect me with someone who is? So it's sort of managed chaos, I would say, in the inbox. But yeah, with that said, there's a lot of irrelevant pitches I get too. One of the biggest mistakes I think people make is not knowing who they're pitching and what they're writing about. They're trying to do this spray and pray method of pitching that I really don't think works. So, two areas I don't cover are like baby products and stories related to like childcare, as well as anything related to dogs. I'm a cat person. I like dogs too, but I've never had a dog, and it's not a lifestyle. Like being a dog mom is not a lifestyle I'm really familiar with. So I've never written about dogs. I've never written about babies, and yet people pitch me dog and baby products all the time. So, you know, as much as there are great pitches in there that really do help me do my work and stay informed about what's going on in the industries I care about, there's also a lot of kind of junk in there that isn't relevant too.
Yeah, there's two things in there I think I want to kind of two threads I want to pull on. So this idea of like understanding the journalist. I mean, I've written about and done studies about the spray and pray technique versus like getting highly relevant, targeted, and 100% agree with you. And the data shows, that you have to these days, especially as, like you said, the journalists are now getting outnumbered by the PR professionals. But I guess my question is, there is this mindset for some people that based off of a bio, perhaps, like you see that it's maybe, Johnny does product reviews and she's written about dogs or she's written about cats. So my instinct is, oh, she's probably open to any pets, so I'm going to pitch her my dog story. When really, I mean, the way that I like to tell people to do this is kind of anchor on existing coverage, like to that specificity where it's like, you've covered this cat for de-shedder, whatever tool or something, so you might be interested in this new one that it's like a 1-to-1, like as close as you can get to previously covered things. I mean, does that rule make sense to you? See, because the pushback is, well, I'm going to miss out. If I narrow it down that much, I might miss out to those people who do have only covered cats, but they're open to covering dogs. They just haven't written about it before. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't fault any PR person who's trying to do their job and get in touch with the right people. I think, not to criticize my colleagues too much, but I think people can be really precious about this work and not recognize there's a whole business behind it. I don't get mad when I get these pictures related to babies or dogs, especially when they are kind of like not quite aligned, but like adjacent, like we were talking about. I've actually covered cat litter boxes before, so why not cover like doggy bags? I mean, there is sort of a relationship there, but I generally think you get better results from being more specific. But if you really think you have something that might be adjacent to what I cover, I don't mind the pitch. Worst that can happen is I read it, it's not relevant, and I don't respond. That's it. So, to that end, I don't think, you're right. There is a difference between like straight spray and pray about like, I just have this list of 1,500 journalists, I'm going to send it to all of them, versus I have a targeted list of about 50 that I think maybe might be interested in this.
Yeah.
And speaking of cats, I'm sorry if you can hear my cat crying outside the door.
No, it's okay. I can. I don't think listeners will be able to. The Riverside has worked wonders. I've had people's dogs barking throughout the whole time, and it's muted them out. So
amazing.
But, your cat here is for looking out for all the cat pitches out there.
That's true.
I appreciate that. This wants to be a part of the podcast. I get it. Okay, so the other thing that you said that I wanted to kind of tease out more is this idea of, you are pitching stories to editors. And, when you're pitching a freelancer, it's much different than pitching someone who's working in-house, because the in-house, especially pitching like directly to an editor, although I don't think a lot of people do that. I think it's, pitching to the journalists who then have to pitch to an editor. Can you maybe just walk through that process a little bit, either because you work both, right? Like either the in-house or you as a journalist, which I'm sure is very similar, where it's like, as a PR person, you are packaging this pitch, this idea for the journalist who then has to go pitch it again to someone else. So, and I think having that mindset, it just really sets you up better for success. But I'd love to hear someone who's done it to kind of explain the process a little bit more for people.
Yeah. So, if I'm going to pitch a story to an editor, the first thing I do is like, let's say I have some great idea for a story. The first thing I'm going to do is see which editors I've already worked with who might be interested in it. They're the ones I'm going to go to first because we have a warm relationship. Anybody who's sent a pitch knows that a warm pitch is better than a cold pitch, right? The chances of success are much higher when you're pitching to somebody who already knows you and likes your work and what you're up to, and than if you're reaching out of the blue. So that's the first thing I do. The second thing I would do is, if all of those editors said no thank you, I would start researching other editors who might be interested. So I might have a couple publication ideas off the top of my head. Like if I had a travel story, I might be going to Condé Nast Traveler, Travel and Leisure, Afar, those, the core kind of brands that are in this space, and introduce myself, right? So my cold pitch emails are usually 3 paragraphs. The first one is extremely short, just like, hey, I have an idea for you. And I might even get a little bit more specific and say possibly for this section or this feature that you usually run. And then I will pitch my idea. This is like the most important part of my email. It will include a sample headline of how I think, or a sample headline of what I think could possibly appear at the top of the story, and maybe a 3 to 5 sentence description of what the story is. The basics: who, what, where, when, why. That's what they teach you in journalism school, that every story needs to cover. I'll also include some potential sources that I think could be a fit, either people I've already kind of lined up interviews with or thought or am in discussions with, or people who I've come across in the course of my research who I think could be relevant, but I haven't talked to yet. And then any other core details I think are important, such as proposed length or access to images, kind of logistical stuff. And then my last paragraph is a mini about me. So what you see on my website is a very long biography about me. Nobody has time to read that, even on my website, but especially not in your inbox, right? So I pull out my, the core basics about me. Like, I've been doing this work for more than 15 years. I've been published in X, Y, and Z publications, and I'll name drop the biggest ones that are in the beat that I'm pitching for right now.
Right, right.
And that's kind of it, right? Because basically I'm trying to prove to them that I'm qualified to write this story. And that's it. Then I send it and I wait and usually get no response because editors are even more busy and have even busier inboxes than I do. And then, then there's the art of the follow-up. So it's actually like, I think there's a lot of synergy between the way PR people pitch and the way freelance journalists pitch. And I think the more that PR folks can align their pitches to the way journalists need to pitch their editors, the more success they'll have.
Yeah, I mean, how much does the publication and like what they're covering, do they have internal schedules or themes and that sort of thing? Like, is that stuff that you can kind of glean as a PR, professional? I'm just thinking like to your point, like how you can align that and make it as easy as possible for them to then go pitch it to their editors. I mean, I've heard, timeliness, if you can tie it to, this thing is trending, so therefore, it's going to be more agreeable to the editor because, they at the end of the day, they want to get more eyeballs on the website, right? Like that's
Right.
the name of the game. So
Right.
it's like, what are some of those things that you can include that will help kind of hook the editor and make it a win-win game for both?
Yeah, so I think we're talking about two different things here, and they're both important. The first is like, how do you know what the editor might even possibly be interested in? Editorial calendars are historically a way that journalists and PR folks could look ahead for the year at what the themes of a magazine are, and usually those carry over to digital as well, a little bit more loosely. But if a publication's covering farms in August, you might see more farm-related content on their website that time of year as well. So that's something you can use to look ahead and start playing with story ideas for your clients and pitching journalists. For a print magazine, we're talking usually 6 months ahead of time, sometimes a little longer. And then, sorry, what was the question? I think there was a two-parter here.
Yeah. Sorry. So like, I love that. I mean, the editorial calendar and kind of getting used to what and how a brand, tends to, or publication tends to kind of their cadences and like the different themes that they cover. I guess what else can you include that makes it easier?
Yeah. In addition to the editorial calendars, sometimes editors will also let either the general public or a core group of writers know the types of stories they're looking for right now. So if you can spot one of those calls for pitches that go out to writers, you can sometimes like backdoor it and go to the writer directly and be like, hey, editor at Business Insider is looking for these types of stories. I actually have one that you could potentially write about. But then, like, when I'm working for places like Forbes and Yahoo, I'm almost working in an editor role. I'm not an editor at either of those publications, to be clear. But what I mean by that is I am selecting what I want to write about. I don't have a gatekeeper giving me the green light to write about something or not. So, I do put on my editor hat when I'm thinking about stories for those publications, and I get paid based on traffic, right? So I want to look for stories that are going to drive traffic. Some things that people have done to be successful in pitching me are looking at Google Trends data and for example, an Advent, somebody representing a chocolate company pitched me in late August saying that searches for Advent calendars were like spiking in late August, which is far earlier than I would think. But that piqued my interest. And then his pitch included a few Advent calendars that were already available from his client. And he was basically like, hey, this data is there. Like, let me know if you want to work on a story. And I immediately picked it up and I did a roundup of Advent calendars. And it was pretty successful. Even my that was for Yahoo, and my editors reached out to me. They're like, hey, do you want to consider pulling this story down? It feels too early to us. And I replied.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah, I replied to them. I was like, yeah, it feels early to me too, but here's the data. And I said, I totally respect if you want me to pull it down and wait a couple months to republish it. That would be fine. And they said, nope, actually, you have good instinct here. This is good. Like, leave it up. So yeah, any sort of data that you can pull in that makes it that shows me, hey, there might be like strong reader interest in this is compelling.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. And again, like this idea of kind of putting yourself in the shoes of the editor or the newspaper, the magazine owner, and what is going to sell papers, what is going to get clicks, what is going to get views on the website. I mean, I think a lot of it is, I have created this story. Now I need to see where it fits rather than like coming up with a story that fits for this particular publication kind of and working backwards. So those things can definitely be at odds. I mean, as an agency, right, like you're often hired to get as much coverage as possible, right? So you come up with some story that's going to be wide reaching because you want it to be wide reaching, but sometimes you can limit yourself because, you might hit three of these journalists or three of these publications that fit, broadly, but that fourth one that is really important to you has already covered it, or like they tend to cover that same topic, 6 months from now. So the more I talk to people who have more of a traditional PR background versus a digital PR background, I feel like the thought process is more on like the singular, like how can I get that one, that one magazine cover, piece of coverage or that one link or whatever mentioned from that one magazine. That's the key target, which I just think is fascinating because I do think there is we're finding more and more like this idea of like, relevant coverage, relevant links matter a lot more than, just getting mass quantities of links. And I think there's a lot to that, but there's still very much a big gap between, I think, the more traditional minded strategies versus like a digital PR, even in terms of expectations. Like you get hired thinking you're going to get 10, 20, 30 links for every, story that you put out there, when I feel like a digital PR agency might be happy reporting, hey, we got you this one piece of coverage and, the metrics are somewhat different. They're tied to like ads and it's like, oh, this is worth $1 million or something. Whereas, a digital PR will be like, I get you like 3 links and you paid $300 for each of them or something. So
There's always a
very
balance of like quality versus quantity. And I think one thing I've learned consulting with so many PR folks is that clients have different goals, right? Like some really want that breadth of coverage. They want their link and their story in 10, 20 publications. Obviously, the better the publication, the happier they are, but they just want to be out there. And others care a lot more about like one really high quality story in one prestigious publication. And for them, that would be a mega win. So I think the strategies are very different for each approach.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you kind of, say you're hired to work on a brand and they give you carte blanche, like, what do you think is more impactful? Maybe it's a brand new cat food or something. Do you want them to get that one? Is it more impactful to have that one piece of coverage in that one hyper-focused, magazine or something where their readers are, or is it better to get mentioned everywhere?
I think for something as commodified as like cat food, I would want to be everywhere, right? I'd want that brand recognition. I'd want to be building that with my customers. I think a lot of times with commodity products, customers don't care that much about the background. They just want to know what the product is. Does it work? Is it better than what else is on the shelf, right? So the more you can prove that, the better. And I also don't think I think there's such a low likelihood of any reader wanting to read 500, 1,000 words about a cat food, like one specific brand, that I think like it's just impossible. But like perhaps if there's like a really compelling backstory of the founders, I mean, this would be really sad, but like let's say I founded a cat food company because I was feeding my cat commercial food and it made my cat really sick or something like that. Okay, that all of a sudden gets a little more interesting. Maybe because this cause is so passionate for me, I want that story told and I'm willing to wait for the right publication to tell it. Now, again, let's be realistic. We're talking about cat food. I don't know if this has like exact application in this context, but I think you get what I mean. It depends on
Yeah.
like what the story is and what the brand and the product, if there is one. What are we even talking about? I stayed at a really amazing resort in Dominica, which is this great island in the Caribbean. It's called the Nature Island. That's its nickname. And I wrote a few stories about the experience, but the one that this particular resort was very excited about was this in-depth hotel review I did for Travel and Leisure. They felt that I really captured the heart of what they were trying to do. I interviewed the owner and how his wife's father was an architect and that he gave them designs for these bungalows for their wedding. Like, it was such a beautiful backstory. They were so happy with that. Now, obviously, that's also a very prestigious publication and wonderful brand recognition for them. And while I can't speak for them, I feel in my gut that they would be happier with that one in-depth review that really tells their story in a great publication, rather than me putting it in 5 different roundups and writing just a short blurb. I think they would be happier with the coverage in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not, I guess, really a one-to-one. Like, get into like the digital PR space. There's a lot of the coverage and a lot of the stories that people are coming up with are kind of like tangentially related to the brand because it's harder, or it's easier sometimes to come up with those. Like, I'm sure you've seen these, like the city index study type thing where it's like, if you're a cat food brand, maybe you're coming up with the best cities to raise a cat or something,
Mhm.
something like that.
Yeah.
And
Yep. I know what you're
that
talking
becomes
about.
your piece. But, to me, like that's wide reaching, maybe more wide reaching than just like a individual review. But to your point, like in my mind, I agree with you, like a review has much more impact and hopefully would impact the bottom line way stronger than like, we got a bunch of links to this city index study about the best cities for cats, which can maybe help some keywords rank. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think the more that we get into this, the more I do this podcast, it's like the more I'm realizing that the bottom line is something that like the best of the best seem to really focus in on, in terms of like the agencies and practitioners they're always kind of focused in on that. And even if it's not what the client wants, at least trying to have those conversations with the client to like, hey, your idea is good, but like, just, like this other idea is probably going to impact you in a better way. Like so yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
always
mean,
an interesting
I
thing.
think clients are hiring you because they have a particular goal in mind, whether it is those backlinks that they think are really important for the SEO, whether it is like we want to increase sales and we know that PR is part of that, or whether they are like, we have a strong story to tell and no one's telling it and we want your help making that happen, right? Like, then your job as a publicist is to go in and advise on like, hey, what's possible, right? Do we have the best approach to meet that goal, whether it is strong storytelling or sales or whatever it is? And then what can we do to increase the chances of hitting this goal? Like, what are some strategies that you, client, haven't thought of or haven't tried yourself yet?
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. All right. Last I want to hit is something you alluded to before we get to these like little quick hit questions that is a new kind of thing I'm trying to do. But you alluded to this earlier, this idea of like using your inbox as like a database almost, right? Like a Rolodex or something where you might come back to it for some story ideas or from experts. So this to me makes me think about this idea that gets thrown around all the time, which is building relationships with journalists, right? And I've said it. I've talked to Britt about it, in lots of different ways. And other guests. How you can do it, and it's engaging with people, and it's not necessarily maybe building relationship as much as it is building trust. But I'd love to hear your take on this because from the other side, it's like I think the one thing I would like to dispel and tell me if you agree with this is this idea that like just because you have a relationship with a journalist doesn't mean they're going to be more likely to cover your pitch, right? Like it might get you a foot in the door, but if it's not a good fit, it might be your brother pitching this pitch. You're not going to just get a coverage because you know the person. But I'd love to hear your take on this.
Yes, I completely agree with that. But I think that statement, when I see that floating around on LinkedIn a lot, like, oh, the relationship is great, but it's not a guarantee. Like, yes, I agree with that, but I think it's a huge door opening for you that people without that relationship don't have. And for a few reasons. The first is like I said, I'm getting 200 plus pitches a day, right? Which ones am I actually going to give my time and attention to? Like, obviously a subject line matters, right? And that might encourage me to open and read the email. But if let's say the subject line is whatever, I'm looking at who's sending it to me and thinking, do I know this person? Do I recognize their name? Right? Like, do we have a relationship that warrants me giving them attention? Right? And if I have limited hours in the day, who's getting my attention? I'm going to prioritize the people I do have relationships with. It doesn't mean I'm ignoring emails from everybody else, but it means like this is where my attention is going
Bumps
first.
you up the list. Yeah.
It bumps
I
you up
mean, I
the
love that.
list.
Yeah.
And then, What was I going to say? Like you said about trust, right? It is about trust. There's so much on in this industry that is out of all of our control, including our editors, right? That knowing who you're working with and knowing you can trust them is so critical to, maintaining that mindset that everybody's operating in good faith and that we'll work together really effectively. I've sometimes, put out a calls for pitches for doctors or dietitians or something in the health space. And a PR person will email me who I don't know, but she will say, "Oh, I have this amazing client. They can speak to X, Y, and Z. View them for your story." And I'll say yes. And then they fall off the face of the earth. They don't even respond with like possible interview times, or like I will send interview times and I cannot get them to like respond at that point. Or if we're doing an email interview and I say, "Hey, I need answers by noon on Friday," and 4 p.m. on Friday, those answers still haven't come in. I'm in a real bind now because now I have to find somebody over the weekend and convince them to give me the time of day so that I can meet my deadline on Monday and still make my editor happy and get paid, right? So, if let's say I'm looking at two potential sources and they're both pretty compelling, but one is coming from somebody I've worked with a million times and she always delivers, and when her client flakes out, she's found me backups or gone above and beyond to make sure I can do my job, versus somebody I've never worked with before. I'm going to choose the person I know is reliable because it means I know I can get my job done. So I
Yeah.
think in that sense, the relationship matters a whole lot, even though it doesn't guarantee you coverage. Even if we're friends, like I wish I could cover everything my friends' clients were doing. That would be great. Like everybody would be so happy. Everybody would love me. Like what would be better than that? But it's just
You'd probably
not
have
the
a
way
lot
the
more
industry.
friends too.
That is true, friends. But it's not the way the industry works. So, I think that it's a very nuanced discussion, and I think it often gets really glazed over in these like viral LinkedIn posts about this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you've convinced me for sure. I think we have these internal conversations all the time, I think. And I, I know I said it was going to last question, but this opened up this idea of trust. And have you heard these stories of like the fake experts? I know this is kind of more of a UK thing, I think, but I'm wondering if that type of thing has happened to you here in the US, like coming up, you get pitched someone and you're like, wait a minute, this isn't a real person.
This has been going on a very long time, like well before generative AI became available to the public. I remember I was writing some personal finance articles for like what would I say, a loan company that I did some content marketing for, but they expected me to act like a journalist and vet sources and interview them. People were like companies, or I don't even know who these entities were. I would get pitches about people and I would say, okay, this person sounds good. Let me just like do a quick background check on them, look up their LinkedIn or whatever. And like all of a sudden, like everything starts falling apart. Like this person doesn't seem to exist, or like not in this context. So
Yeah.
this has been going on a really, really long time. And, again, I think that goes back to the relationships that, there's certain people I know aren't going to do that to me.
Yeah.
I would be absolutely mortified if I wrote a story that ended up having a fake expert in it. I would be so mortified. So I am pretty careful about vetting people. And now with generative AI, I don't mind people using it as a tool, but some of my editors include in my contracts that I cannot submit AI generated content. So if one of my sources is doing an email interview with me and sends me an AI generated answer, it could put me in hot water with my client. And this
Yeah.
is a
Wow.
hard industry. I need to maintain my relationships with editors in order to make a living. So it's something I'm so careful about. I've always preferred phone and video interviews. Like I've always done them instead of email interviews whenever possible. But even like so many people are using generative AI for all their writing. I'm even more insistent on like, let's meet face to face and have a conversation. Like not only will the answers be more compelling because they're generated through a conversation, but I know for sure that they are not written by a chatbot.
Yeah. Yeah. Man. All right, let's get to these quick questions. The first one I want to ask is not something I prepped you with, but do you care about AI written pitches? Are you automatically blocking them? Are you ignoring them as some people have talked about doing?
Ignore them, but if they're not saying anything, they're pretty easy for me to just ignore as a bad pitch. I don't really care, but I will say when you use AI a lot, and I use it as a tool a lot for my own purposes, I can see AI
You can
generated
tell.
content
Yeah,
right
you can
away.
smell it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't connect with me very well.
Yeah. Okay, next one. Do you think PR pros should send and or paste a press release right in a pitch email, or is that overkill?
I think it should have a mini pitch up top, like an actual good quality, like quick pitch. And then you can put the rest of the press release like at the bottom for more background information, but I probably won't read it.
Yeah. How about including images? Should people include images in their pitches?
No, for the most part. I think if you're going to include images, I think include them as a Google Drive or Dropbox folder and that I can just click into and make sure that the permissions are set that anyone with the link can view them.
All right. This next one is interesting because, I asked you about your day and what a typical day looks like for you, and you're not a early riser like myself included. But this idea of pitching, what time of day do you prefer to be pitched? Does it matter what time you get a pitch?
No,
And do you
it
think
does
that's
not matter
used?
to me at all.
Is it used specifically like as a freelancer? Or if you were working in a newsroom, I mean, would it matter more that it comes in first thing in the morning or something?
Well, I mean, timing matters if you're pitching breaking news, right? Like timing
Right.
matters a lot. Or if you're pitching for a newspaper and you want a daily newspaper and you want it out in tomorrow's issue, well, you better send that pitch as early in the day as possible so they have time to consider it and then cover it. But for me, go pitch me at 4 a.m. on a Sunday. I don't care. Like I'll read it when I get to my inbox, and it makes no difference, positive or negative, when you send it to me.
Right. Journalists aren't sitting there looking at their inboxes and be like, "Ooh, this one just came in. This one looks great." Right. It's
Not
not like that.
most of us, thankfully.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
Yeah.
but not most.
If you
not
have
mostly.
250 read emails, like you're saying, yeah, I don't see that being an issue.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question. Should you or should a PR professional ever pitch via social media?
No, don't pitch me over social media. One, it's annoying and kind of like violating, but more importantly, it's not where you want your pitch to be. It caught my attention in a bad way, but also I can't search my Instagram inbox for a source. I'm going to go to my email inbox. So really, like, get your pitch in my inbox, my email inbox, and like that's the best place for me to go to find it. I'm not searching Instagram for product pitches or source pitches.
Yeah. That makes total sense. Well, thanks for playing quick questions there. That was my first go at that. I think I'm going to keep that as a feature in our
That was fun.
podcast going forward.
Yeah.
Joni, I want to thank you so much for joining us. But before we wrap up, I want to give you a chance to pitch your Pitch Fix Live. So I mentioned this earlier. Joni has a live workshop where she gives personalized, actionable feedback for your pitch. So tell the people what you got going on.
Yeah, so I'd love for you to join me on April 9th. It's going to be a 75-minute live virtual workshop on Zoom. About a third of it will be spent on me going over what makes a compelling pitch right now, do's and don'ts, similar things to what we've talked about here, but in more depth and with some real world examples. And then we'll dive into to feedback on the pitches from actual participants. So you'll submit your pitch. I'll give my take on like what could be done to improve it, what's working really well. And then other people in the room will also be doing that for you. So you'll get tons and tons of feedback and data points on what you're working on so that you can perfect it. Everyone will also receive a pitch fix, which is my service where I offer personalized video feedback on a pitch. So you'll get that after the event as well.
Awesome. Yeah, April 9th. Check it out. I'll share the link in the show notes. I will also share Joni's website, jonimsweet.com, and the link to her newsletter, her Substack, which, again, has some fantastic advice. Remind me the name of the Substack, your newsletter.
If you just go to jonisweet.substack.com, that's where it is. What's the name? It's like Joni Sweet's Press Opportunities and Media Insights. But like truly, we are long overdue for a rebrand of that. That was just like the first name I came up with, and I haven't changed it. But Yeah, the name is a little clunky, but I promise the content is good.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, Joni Sweet's Press Opportunities and Media Insights. Yeah, that's what it says. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Joni. If people have any other questions about this stuff, please leave in the comments. I'll make sure that Joni answers them. Any of the stuff that we covered today, or questions about the workshop, about what Joni's working on. Reminder, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Share this stuff with your colleagues. Help get more eyeballs on Joni's newsletter as well. This was long overdue, but I'm so glad we found some time to make this work. Joni, this was great. I'm sure the listeners are going to really enjoy this. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I really loved our conversation, and I hope it's helpful.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Good luck out there. Thanks for watching.